Welcome to Burnt Popcorn. This week we'll be discussing Star Wars Rogue One, Superhero Saturation, and Ghostbuster Gate.
Or as it's also known as Lady Ghostbusters or Feminist Ghostbusters.
Now, probably the big breaking news that came out this week was some Star Wars confirmation. The spin-off, Star Wars Rogue One, was announced. That is the one that Felicity Jones is helming, and that the gentleman that directed Gareth Edwards, the director of the Godzilla remake with Bryan Cranston, is helming that. Written by Chris Weitz, who has a movie out this week in Cinderella. He also wrote the animated answer to A Bug's Life with Woody Allen, Ants. In case you forgot, and Felicity Jones, star of The Theory of Everything, is the first major star, and from all intents, she seems to be the star of that film. Episode 8 also got an announced release date. They're pushing stars back to May in 2017.
So, now, have any plot details surfaced?
For the standalone?
Yeah.
The rumor was that this movie was going to be a heist movie detailing a team of bounty hunters or mercenaries that the Rebel Alliance hired to steal the original Death Star plans that Princess Leia sneaks to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, and there's something about that I actually like, because if you really think about it, it is the first victory against the Empire.
Right, and it's an important story to tell in that universe. How did these very important plans get into the hands of the Rebel Alliance? But the title Rogue One, which I'm not crazy about.
Yes, you did mention you were not a fan of Rogue One, and you compared it to my ball droid.
Yeah, Rogue One is the call sign for the leader of Rogue Squadron. Rogue leader Wedge Antilles and Luke Skywalker held that title, so that has led some people to believe that this movie may be about Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like, the bounty hunter.
Right, and if you're going along with that, if this is like an origin kind of story for Rogue Squadron, that's certainly possible. But that does go against the earlier rumor about the mercenaries and the bounty hunter. So other than that, no details on the plot. I just think they could have come up with a better sounding title. But then again,
I'm not happy about the title.
Yeah, but then again, I thought about it, and some of the Star Wars subtitles are not the best, such as Attack of the Clones, which makes it sound like a 50s B movie. But according to people who were at a press event when this was announced, they did show some concept art for the film, and it's been described as Star Wars meets Halo.
That puts like a picture in my mind.
Right.
They have like exosuits.
Right, and they're if I'm not mistaken, I believe they described a lot of tech in these concept arts would kind of go against the heist movie that we thought we may have been getting, and this seems to be
also,
more of like an action.
Yeah, it also kind of goes against your preconceptions of a Rogue Squadron movie. I played the video game Star Wars.
Right,
Rogue
as did I.
Great Nintendo 64.
Great game.
I don't remember any like exosuits or anything.
Right now, granted, that's no longer canon, so to say. But even then, you could see a kind of Rogue Squadron movie working with like a Halo design, but to me that seems like they're going for some kind of action movie, a la like an Avatar almost. Like not necessarily Avatar in scope, but Avatar was a very tech heavy film, and the action sequences, a lot of mech, a lot of technology going on.
Maybe they're referring. I don't know. When I think of like Halo, I actually think of the Stormtroopers. I think the Stormtroopers have more in common with Master Chief than
Right. I believe though what they were referring to in the concept art was more so like vehicles and kind of like machinery, not so much.
Yeah, I'm hung up on the exosuit. If one cannot tell already.
But who knows what this is going to be? I mean, this is going to be, the Star Wars movie that's going to show whether or not the gamble to make more movies works. So the trilogy works because fans have been waiting for those other 3 movies when George Lucas said his plan was always to make 9.
Yeah.
And you have the returning original character, so there is a big investment in the older characters and that already established mythology. But with the standalone, especially since the standalone is not the eagerly anticipated and hoped for Boba Fett movie.
See, this is let's riff on this a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is getting to be a bold move.
Yeah.
I feel, because there is really a hunger out there,
Right.
for these character based. Like,
Right.
everybody wanted to see a Boba Fett film.
Right.
There was even rumors of a young
Han Solo.
And it just seems to me like, all right, Rogue Squadron, it's a neat thing.
Right.
But is it enough?
Exactly.
Is
And
it enough?
Exactly.
So my question to you then is it the title that's bothering you, Tony? Or is it the concept?
It's more so I'm unsure of where they're going with it right now.
I'm going to be really honest with you, Tony. I feel like you're a little let down by the concept.
I am. Granted, I loved Rogue Squadron and everything, but with
I'm
it
not
being
saying you don't, but
right,
I feel like you were expecting something more along the lines of
I was expecting
Slave One,
right,
rather than Rogue One,
or the original rumor of the heist movie, the stealing of the Death Star plans, because to me that's a very interesting and important story. That's the event that sets the whole classic trilogy in motion. They don't steal those plans. You don't have episodes.
4, 5, and 6,
no. But I mean, we'll wait and see. The other thing that has me iffy on this one is the team behind it. I did not.
Well, you said, when I heard you say Gareth Edwards.
Yeah. Now, granted, I did not.
Cold sweat ran down the back of my ass crack.
Right now,
I did not like I couldn't.
No,
I couldn't watch
Godzilla.
I couldn't.
No,
I couldn't do it.
No,
I wanted to. Why they chose to not have Bryan Cranston be the main character is beyond me.
Right, because up until spoilers, his death in the movie, you're really interested in that relationship between the father and the son, and certainly he was an interesting enough actor and character to carry it through. So that has me a little wary. I mean, I have not seen his earlier movie Monsters, which I've heard is a good movie. But that was like a very small budget kind of.
Right.
And some directors, they're very good.
They thrive on a smaller budget.
Right. And when they're handed a bigger task, they just don't know what to do with all that money.
It's too much. It's too much for them.
And then the screenwriter, Chris Weitz, is a little underwhelming. In my opinion.
You're going to get all of the Cinderella fans.
I know. But, I mean, we'll see on that. They do have an interesting production squad behind them. Simon Emmanuel, who did Dark Knight Rises and Fast and Furious 6. And Jason McGatlin, who did the Adventures of Tintin movie and the War of the Worlds remake. Mm-hmm. So you do seem to have some producers who are experienced in bigger budget films, which may help Gareth fix some of the directorial mistakes he made in Godzilla, but
what made them say Gareth Edwards? I mean, I'm not bashing the guy. It's making a movie is always a difficult endeavor, but
well, I mean, regardless,
all the directors.
Right, regardless though, I believe Godzilla did make money. I mean, I believe it was a box office success.
So here we go. Here we go again. This just sounds to me like this is the typical, studio response now. There's, the way that the studio industry works is they really don't care all that much about critical reception.
Right.
They care about the box office, which is why there was more than one Tomb Raider movie starring Angelina Jolie. And they did not care about how terrible the movie itself was. It made money, so they made another one, and then they keep doing that until it don't make no more money.
Right.
And that isn't how you do it. And when you're dealing with like this intellectual property, And this is the new phase, and we'll get more into this in our
right
next
because
topic,
an oversaturation of Star Wars movies would.
but you're dealing with an intellectual property. You're dealing with a created universe, if you will, that is well beloved by millions and millions of people, and it just seems like, based on some of the decisions that are being made right here, right now, it just seems like the bean counters are having a lot of say here.
Right.
And the creative people, not so much.
Right.
It just sounds like this is a money show.
Right,
now.
because look at what they did with Episode 7. They did not like the original script. Yeah. And who do they bring in to help fix it? Lawrence Kasdan.
Now that was a brilliant move.
Exactly. And that has me a little worried that they're giving the screenplay to this movie to a guy like Weitz. And I believe he's the second guy to come along to work a script with this movie. I could be wrong, but I believe I read somewhere that there was a...
Believe it or not, I'm not bothered by him.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered by the writer. I'm worried about...
You're more worried about the director.
I am worried about the director, because bad decisions were made in Godzilla.
Oh, exactly. A lot of bad creative decisions, such as for a movie being called Godzilla, there's 5 minutes of Godzilla in that goddamn movie.
Yeah.
It takes I think when Rebecca and I watched that, we marked down the time you first see Godzilla. It's not until I think almost the 50-minute mark, almost halfway in, and even then it's a very small glimpse.
And also, aside from that, horrific pacing.
Oh yeah,
horrific pacing.
Yeah,
I mean, we could go on and on and on about this.
Yes,
but.
I'm just
getting scared because I know how this works. I know how this game works. And it just seems to me like...
Hollywood will come across somebody they think is really hot. This is... Sometimes it doesn't always work.
These are not the types of rationales that should be put into these high-level projects. They're just not. And it seems like they are treating Star Wars 7 differently than they're treating these spin-off movies.
Yeah, because I think Lawrence Kasdan was also a move to help allay some of the fears that some fans had, that, you have people who...
It also was a good fucking decision.
Yeah, because, come on, he wrote, the most well-loved Star Wars film. He wrote Empire.
The guy's an amazing fucking writer, too.
Right.
I mean, his works are, incredible.
Right, and...
Any writer in the world would die to have his filmography.
Right, and did he write The Mosquito Coast? I could be wrong. Did he write the screenplay for that movie?
I feel like he did.
Yeah.
I feel like he did.
Right, but regardless, and you know what? Maybe some of my fears could be contained if... Maybe they'll come around and say, you know what, we are doing the heist movie, but the mercenaries that they hire, maybe they're some of the first members of Rogue Squadron. Who knows? Maybe that's what they're going to try and pull. But as of right now, I guess we can assume this might be a Rogue Squadron movie. Or, maybe they just like the title Rogue One, and this might not have anything to do with Rogue Squadron, which I think would probably piss off a good chunk of Star Wars fans, because I think a Rogue Squadron movie would work. It'd be awesome, but it just seems like it's a story that I don't think a lot of fans were interested in the first spin-off movie being that story.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
And that's... I know what you don't want to do a character movie for every single Star Wars character. Otherwise, my God, a Lobot movie.
I mean, you can argue. I mean, there's certain things that you can argue, and one of the arguments that, of course, a lot of people will make is, of course, oh, Dave, you can't be saying that you want a character movie every time.
Right.
What are you trying to do? Are you trying to turn the Star Wars cinematic universe into the Marvel cinematic universe? I don't know. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that there are certain characters that
are interesting enough,
that are beyond interesting enough, that could very well take us. I mean, look, Slave One.
Right.
The title sells itself.
Yeah, and a Boba Fett movie also allows Disney to do a very dark and mature Star Wars film, and you don't aside
Remember
from
that video game that was floating around out there that got canceled?
I think Coruscant 1313. That was supposed to be the first
it was like Star Wars Underworld.
Yeah,
you know?
And that was going to be the first M-rated Star Wars game. You were going to go into the bowels of Coruscant. I believe your character was a bounty hunter. That was going to be a hardcore, violent, adult Star Wars game.
If they would have taken that and just made it Slave fucking One, all right, it's starring Boba goddamn Fett, taking you down into the Star Wars underworld. All right, that would have been amazing. Dealing with the seedier sides and the grimier sides of Coruscant and Tatooine.
Right. And it also allows you don't also want every Star Wars movie to be the same type of movie. Like these standalones. Like a heist movie would have been interesting. The Boba Fett movie, that, a hardcore action crime thriller.
Yeah.
And then, there's plenty of other types of stories you can tell.
I'm sorry, every time we talk about the potential heist movie about the stealing of the Death Star plans, for some reason I picture Quentin Tarantino directing it. I don't know why, but it just seems awesome that you would get a heist movie guy. Like, it's like Star Wars meets Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah,
there would have been. Sounds awesome to me.
There would have been a 15-minute scene discussing and analyzing the Cantina Band song.
That's right. They could. You could use. A lot of people say that the song that they put in the special editions, that's, what is it, Snide Scoogles?
Yes, and Return of the Jedi,
What was it called, that song? Do you know?
I believe on the soundtrack it's called Jedi Rocks.
So if you took... a lot of people bitched about Jedi Rocks being like some little kiddie thing that they decided to put in the middle of this really dark, grim situation where you have dirty pervert child molesting Jabba the Hutt with his big tongue. And all of a sudden you see like a Mickey Mouse Club thing,
Rock Band.
So how do we make it dark? You take like some bounty hunter torturing another bounty hunter dancing around to Jedi Rocks.
Right.
I mean, you could...
And the supporting characters. In the bounty hunter scene on Empire, Bosk, Dengar, IG-88.
Oh, come on. We all know we want to see Boba Fett versus IG-88. Come on.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a Dark Horse comic detailing that story. I could be wrong, but I remember reading that when I was younger.
I played a video game. I'm sure many of us have. A lot of people say it was the reason to buy Nintendo 64. It was called Star Wars Shadows of the Empire.
Yes.
And there was a level in there where you were in some salvage yard planet or something like that.
Yeah.
And there was Boba Fett and IG-88. It was amazing. And it just screams that's this unexplored relationship. I mean, everybody would die to see that.
Right. And it and interestingly, and this kind of leads into our next topic, as of right now, Disney is not oversaturating the Star Wars film market. You're going to have these 3 trilogy films, which go hand in hand, so you got to have the 3.
Yeah.
And they've only announced and confirmed so far 1 spin-off.
Yeah.
They haven't gotten to the point where, Marvel and DC are announcing 7 years worth of pictures in one go, which has led some analysts to believe that we're going to superhero movie ourselves out, and that the saturation of the market, too many superhero movies are going to lead a lot of people. The argument is, once we hit too many superhero movies, like we're approaching, your average viewer is just like, oh, I've seen this movie before. Why do I need to go see Ant-Man or Aquaman? I saw the Justice League. I saw the Avengers 2. Why do I need to go see those movies?
Yeah.
But the question is, if that happens, the big question is, what is going to be the superhero movie that's going to break it?
Honestly, I really, really don't know how. I know that this is going to get me killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be very wrong about this. And Guardians of the Galaxy sort of, it sort of taught me that, the lesser known pictures could do very
right, and a lot of people thought that movie was going to bomb.
Yeah, there was a number of people who actually said, "Nah, this isn't well."
Right, and I was a lot of people. It's an unknown group of heroes.
I had doubts about it too.
Right, and I know you weren't a big fan of it, but I think you didn't walk away thinking
I didn't think
it was going to be as bad as some people thought it was going to be.
I didn't think it was a terrible movie per se. It had some issues, and am I going to see the second one? Yes, of course. But here's what I'm trying to say. There's a movie, and I know I'm going to get killed for this, but if I have, and I'm not saying it's a guaranteed bomb. Keep in mind, but if I were to pick a movie that I feel might underperform, it's going to be Ant-Man.
I can see that.
I know it has Paul Rudd.
Right, and it does have Michael Douglas. I can't see that.
Oh, Michael Douglas. He brings them to the theaters.
I'm just saying.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, but Ant-Man, that I think is the next kind of Guardians of the Galaxy test.
It could go either way, people.
Right, especially because...
what I'm trying to say. It could go either way.
Especially because in the comics, Ant-Man's not the most friendly of characters. He's an alcoholic, he's a wife beater. And there are two characters that take on the identity of Ant-Man. There's Hank Pym, who is being played by Michael Douglas.
His superpower, though,
is turning small. And
here's the thing.
There is that shot in the trailer of him riding an ant or a fly or some kind of insect.
Yeah, and here's the thing. This is from the writer world, okay? And this is the world I live in on a daily basis. But there's a theory in writing. And if you make a character turn small, it better be a comedy or a fantasy, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or Alice in Wonderland. And if you make a person big, it better be an action film. And here's the thing. Traditionally, the more successful films have always made the characters bigger, not smaller.
Right. And this is, speaking of heist films, this is supposed to be the Marvel heist film so we'll see if that'll work. But that, on the Marvel side, I think what's been announced so far, this one is the most iffy. Is even some of the other standalone ones, like the Black Panther movie. That's a very interesting character who does not turn small. No. I believe Ms. Marvel, she has one. Doctor Strange, another interesting character.
Doctor Strange, I think, is going to do well, but
it's going to do well alone because Benedict Cumberbatch is in it, and his fans will go and help that movie.
Love
right, but with that kind of movie, it's a like you said, they go big. There's a lot of magic and a lot of fantasy in that movie, so you have a lot of theatrics to something like that.
Fantasy and superhero films, and fantasy is a popular genre, and the superhero genre is a popular genre. It'll do well, I'm sure. But again, you're mentioning these other characters, Black Panther and Ms. Marvel. I don't know. I really don't know. I think this could be a bridge too far. I could be very wrong about this. And I believe me, I want to see a female superhero standalone film do well. And that sort of has something to do with our next topic as well. But I don't know. Does she have a fan base? Is there a built-in fan base ready for her?
Right. I mean,
or Black Panther.
I think there is from delving into the Black Panther movie. That's something a lot of comic book fans have been wanting.
The hardcore guys, but you know that these films aren't just for the comic book fans,
right? But
there's like the Broheims that go see Thor movies. Like it's a bigger
right. I mean, it's going to depend on how they do it. Like they managed to turn a movie that features a talking raccoon that shoots a gun into something very, very successful.
But how did they do that? They were smart about it.
Yeah,
they made it into an action comedy / buddy film.
Yes, and it worked.
Yes.
Because that was the number one thing that had me skeptical about it. How are they going to make me believe in a talking raccoon that's not going to make me think this is some kind of children's movie.
Right.
Like, how do they avoid making an Ewok mistake
Real
with Rocket
simple.
Raccoon?
You make a foul mouth talking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and we are starting to delve in. I think this is some concern for, like you're saying, those who are not as familiar with the comic book world. Mm-hmm. You're using up all the popular characters now, and now you got to work in and see if people will like the lesser known. Now the Spider-Man movie, bringing Spider-Man, that's smart. At least they have somebody well known for some of these other movies moving forward. But like we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Robert Downey, Chris Evans, they're not going to be around doing those characters forever. Even Hemsworth, I'm sure there's going to be at some point he's going to get tired of putting on the Thor costume.
And at that point, you have 2 options. You do what Hollywood has been doing now for quite some time. You do the reboot,
right? Which could work in it. The comic book world kind of has that written in where the one character will pass on the costume to someone else. Mm-hmm. Like with the Spider-Man thing, we could certainly use up Peter Parker and go to Miles Morales. We can go with some of the other guys. Now, Thor, you can't really. No. I mean, you could
Lady Thor.
Yes, that could work, but as we'll see coming up with the Ghostbusters conversation, that might start another war.
Remember the react? I mean, we'll talk more.
There was a big backlash when they made that.
There's a backlash to anything with a female, as we'll see.
As we'll see.
But here's the thing, though. You either do a reboot or you do a James Bond style where you just recast.
Right. Or, I mean, you could just keep finding characters to make movies about, but then you're delving way too deep. But what you could also do is you could also delve into some of the other Marvel properties that may not be as, like, ones that kind of exist outside the like the Captain America, Avengers kind of universe, some of your other Marvel titles, which could work, but they have to go into a very talented set of hands. Now, let me just say though, and the more I hear this, the more I'm thinking this could work for a good number of years. But I don't think this is sustainable. No,
I don't. I think there's an expiration.
Marvel Phase 3 runs up into 2019.
Yeah.
Depending on how well, your later movies like Infinity Wars Part 2 and the Inhumans, depending on how those do and some of the preceding ones, maybe that has them pull off, because as of right now, they're making a fuck ton of money.
Yeah.
Not only at the box office, but in merchandising.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Everybody's like predicting gloom and doom, but if you just take a cursory look at the box office numbers, it ain't showing up.
No,
even if you
combine, every single Marvel and DC movie made since they've been making them, you're still talking about a haul where both of them alone are in the billions of dollars, and they're not slowing down. Mm-hmm. But let's get on to DC, because DC's trying to copy the Marvel path to success.
And this is where we could run into some.
And this is where I think you're going to start to see the cracks in saturation, because granted, I think Ant-Man is going to be risky.
It is.
It's a risky move, but Marvel has a lot to fall back on. They have a Civil War movie. They have the Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's literally its own little mini studio. It's like Ant-Man is like the little art picture that they're taking a risk on. But they could write it off,
right?
Because we all know that the Infinity War is just it's probably going to be one of the. It may even rival Star Wars, box
right?
Office. It's the one chance that they have it rivaling Star Wars box office.
And sure, let's say they fall 50 million short on Ant-Man. They're going to make that up 3 times over with Thor Ragnarok, because that alone is going to bring in the money. But my fear is you're going to start seeing the cracks with DC. Yeah. And part of the reasons, number one, I have not seen the Henry Cavill, Zack Snyder Superman movie yet, Man of Steel.
It's sad.
That's what I've heard from a lot of people.
You know what? Superman, for being the quintessential superhero, is very hard to do. Yeah. It's a very hard character to translate into the modern world.
Right.
And the only time that it could even be remotely successful is the origin story, because
right.
the guy is just too super.
Yeah,
you know?
And I think in a world,
need a human element,
right, and in a world where
it doesn't usually have it.
A lot of these movies try for some sense of realism or grittiness, conflict. A guy who's that good, it's hard. I'll probably watch that movie this afternoon, but I don't like Zack Snyder and his helming the Justice League. Well, the Batman versus Superman movie, which is supposed to set up the Justice League movie and these other DC characters. I don't like them. That's where my skepticism's not with Batfleck.
No.
Mine is with the direction of Zack Snyder. I thought he did a horrible job with The Watchmen.
Don't bring it up.
And, it's a very divisive movie because there's a lot of fans of the graphic novel of the Alan Moore work who loathe what the film did.
Yeah.
Some who refuse to even see the film.
I was one.
And then there's those who like the movie,
yeah.
and those like me who I just thought it was a piece of shit. And I think a lot of that had to do with Snyder's direction. I don't like his colors. I don't like his slow motion.
I don't know. Yeah, I get that.
And he overdoes it in Watchmen.
At the end of the day, Watchmen is probably... It's like literally adapting a Thomas Pynchon novel to screen. It is an arduous task. And, not many. There's maybe 2 people in the whole world that even stand a shot at adapting Watchmen into a successful film, and I don't think any of them have an interest in it. But
right. So but
I will say this. There is a glimmer of hope for the DC universe. Suicide Squad.
Yes, and I think that's where you're going to see...
I feel that the villains are more interesting in the DC universe than anywhere else.
I agree.
Their villains are... You take the show Gotham, for instance. Gotham became very, very good in the second half of the first season when it did what? It started concentrating on the villains more than it did... young Bruce Wayne and
Commissioner Gordon, not Commissioner Gordon, Lieutenant Gordon,
and Alfred.
And that's going to be important, and the casting is also important. And I think this is where there's a lot of skepticism with what DC is doing. There was, Robert Downey Jr. If you don't cast him in Iron Man, I don't know if it's as successful as it was. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there were certain elements in the studio who told Jon Favreau, we want a younger actor. And he's like, no, I have faith in Robert. It will work. And it did.
Yeah. And good luck finding a replacement for him.
Exactly. Now, huge firestorm over Ben Affleck as Batman. I'll reserve judgment until I see how he plays the character. Because we've had some pretty bad Bruce Waynes and Batmans before. And, the funny thing is some actors make a better Batman than they do a Bruce Wayne or vice versa. My fear is Ben's going to be a better Bruce Wayne than he is a Batman.
I don't know. I had some initial reservations about him.
I don't hate the move. I think it's an interesting move, and I do like that they went older.
I feel like, after... seeing Gone Girl, there's a dark side to Ben.
Yeah, he can pull it off.
I think there's hope for Ben. I'm not gonna bash Ben just yet. Let me see a trailer, and then we'll talk.
I like the look from that one image we have.
It's darker.
It's a Miller. Yeah, I was just gonna say it looks a little bit more Dark Knight Returns kind of Batman. Jesse Eisenberg though as Lex Luthor, that has me.
I don't know how I feel about that. Honestly.
Concerned. I'm not on the Jesse Eisenberg fan wagon.
It's not even
He's been good in stuff, but he just...
The best part of the Superman Returns was oh my god, why am I doing this? Was Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. I liked Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor.
You like that scene where he screams, "No!" Do you remember that scene?
All right.
He does overact a bit, and he chews the scenery quite a bit.
He sort of went into.
He was a very bombastic Lex Luthor.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he was trying to pull a Gary Oldman, where Gary Oldman, the way he did Stanfield in The Professional?
Yes, yeah. Where he could kind of just go into a quick rage.
Yeah, a lot of people, there were some critics earlier in the 90s when that movie first came out that said that Gary Oldman's performance was over the top.
Yes, it's a great performance.
It's considered to be one of the great villain performances in modern film.
Right, and the reason you need to believe that man is a madman.
Yeah,
and my God, the scene where he screams, where they're
Mozart.
Well, that I was thinking of the scene where his one henchman asks, he's like, "All of them?" He screams, "All of them!"
That of course is he kills the whole family. He's like, "Oh, fuck!"
Yes,
he got his blood on my suit. It's brilliant.
Right, but another interesting casting, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, which I think is to dispel any concern that Aquaman
no homo.
Yeah, they're like, look, how do we make Aquaman not seem like a pussy? I know. Let's get the guy who played Khal Drogo to play him.
And by the way, that use of no homo, completely ironic. Okay.
Yes.
Are you
gonna out yourself?
I mean, I am gay, and I'm gay, and I've been accused of being a homophobe. Let me just say, I'm not. Okay. Please, people.
But what you were saying about the villains being the most interesting characters, I think that is important because, like you were saying, Gotham, if Gotham does not have the interesting Batman villains, it doesn't really work. I think a lot of people are watching that show to get the glimpses
I'm only watching it because I love the Penguin. Mm-hmm. The guy who plays him is amazing. Robin Lord Taylor. Mm-hmm. He's such an interesting character. No one has done the Penguin better than this cat. I mean, he is incredible. They introduced the Joker plot line where he was a kid, and you see his childhood. Well, we think it's the Joker. Mm-hmm. There's a good chance it's the Joker. And I'll tell you, it was one of the most chilling portrayals I've seen. It was well done. Really well done.
Now, with the Suicide Squad, are you familiar with some of the announced casts?
Yes.
So, Margot Robbie, Harley Quinn, very good move. Mm-hmm. Jared Leto as the Joker, I think can work.
Well, I feel like they're just going to do a different interpretation.
Yes, and I agree. And from what we've seen online so far with his haircut, it's a very kind of almost like a throwback to the Joker, the Batman animated series, like your kind of like the Joker and the Man Who Laughs. Like that's very.
The Man Who Laughs is, I believe, what they're saying is the source material.
Okay, because if you look at him, he's not going to be the haggard kind of Joker that Heath Ledger played, and he's not going to be the campy Joker that Jack Nicholson played. It seems like he's going to be a very slick, a very serious kind of Joker. Yeah. Like almost like that cold, calculating sociopath kind of Joker. A gentleman, almost.
Yeah. And Jared Leto, I mean, the guy is a talented actor.
Yeah, very.
And I remember the people who were bitching about Heath Ledger.
Right.
There was I remember this, and I'll never forget it. There were people that were absolutely bitching about Heath Ledger being cast as Joker. They're saying, "Oh, look at this pretty boy. There's no way that what the hell is this?" Come on.
Right.
The guy delivered quite possibly the greatest villain performance.
And physically, Jared Leto, he's
30 years.
Very tall, very skinny, lanky. And you do have a lot of those Joker depictions as him being like a tall, lanky kind of figure.
Yeah.
Will Smith is Deadshot.
Will Smith needs something. He does. He needs something after Earth.
Yeah.
And that movie he was just in was like a smaller indie almost feeling.
Yeah. Was Margot Robbie in that movie as well?
Honestly, I don't know. But I don't venture to guess.
Right, but
people know.
It did. Yeah, it did not do as well as they had hoped.
And look. I think this is an interesting topic in of itself because...
And one we'll explore, and Margot Robbie is in that film, because it seems like a lot of the, your actors of heyday, your 90s and early 2000 actors, they're not bringing it in anymore on these solo films.
No.
But that's a topic for another time. Joel Kinnaman, I saw, was replacing Tom Hardy as Rick Flag, which I think is a good move.
Joel Kinnaman is awesome. And anybody that has seen The Killing knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. I mean, if you want to see him skip RoboCop, go to The Killing and watch him.
That shows off what this guy could do.
Right. And Tom Hardy would have been interesting, but Joel Kinnaman, I think, is a very fine replacement.
Yeah.
So, like you said, this cannot go on forever. And interesting, somebody brought up, for the past 50 or so years, we've had James Bond films. What Bond did differently was that those movies were very spaced out.
Yeah.
Because initially with the Connery movies, I think they were putting out a Bond like every other year, every 2 years or so. Mm-hmm. But once Roger Moore takes over, and there was a bit of a gap, and we could include On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but George Lazenby didn't carry it on like some of the other actors. So
there are people that
argue
George Lazenby
is the greatest Bond.
Is the greatest Bond ever, and one of them was walking down the street when on our way here.
I'm kind of surprised he didn't say that the unofficial Bond, Never Say Never Again, was the best Bond. I'm sure
he does feel that.
So, but the Bond movies, there's a bit of a gap, especially once you get to Roger Moore and then Timothy Dalton. And then there's a pretty big gap between Dalton and Pierce. I think it's like a 5 or 6 year gap, if I'm not mistaken.
It's like 89 to 95?
95, 96, yeah. And even then, there's still some 2 or 3 year gaps between, like Tomorrow Never Dies, like GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, World Is Not Enough. And there's like a 3-4 year gap between Die Another Day, which I think was 2002, 2003, and Casino Royale, which I think was 06.
Yeah, and I think what the comic book films are drawing from the Bond films is that Bond had to reinvent himself over and over.
Right.
And I feel like that's sort of what they're going to try with the comic book movies.
Right.
We saw Pierce Brosnan's Bond. Then we were like, we want a darker, edgier Bond. Yeah. So we get the Daniel Craig.
Right, and they move away from a lot of the campier stuff. And it's not until Skyfall, the third movie, where you see a return to some of the older tropes of Bond, the gadgets, Moneypenny, Q. It's not until then you kind of see them like, okay, we've established that Bond is tough and gritty. Now we can kind of work in some toys,
but done in a realistic.
Yeah, like he wasn't getting. He
wasn't getting a pen that could oh man.
Yeah, they weren't getting into the really weird, campy stuff.
No. A laser pen.
Yeah. Now, the Avengers, well, not the Avengers, Marvel versus DC. I believe Superman versus Batman, is that still released on the same day that a big Marvel movie is being released?
I heard that.
I want to say Civil War. Let me double check.
Do a quick confirmation on that, but I feel like
they
are trying to do this.
I think it's the third Captain America movie.
Yeah, I think that they're seriously thinking about doing this, and
no, it's not Civil War. They may have changed it, but I want to say there's something coming out.
It's dangerous to do that. It really is.
Yeah,
because
a lot of these fans see both movies.
Not only that, but what they're worried about is the press. The press,
the
press loves a story like this. They love a competition,
and especially if the Batman
if one falters.
Right, if Batman versus Superman is not, if that's a throwback to Batman and Robin and those type of Batman movies, DC's in trouble.
Yeah.
If Batman versus Superman does not get off that ground strong, they're going to have some issues. I mean, maybe the Suicide Squad can save them, and who knows, maybe they chuck it all to the wind and just focus on villains.
Honestly, I would have no problem with that.
I wouldn't either. I think that would be a nice, let Marvel focus on their heroes. We want to get to our villains. And you could still have the heroes be in those movies. They're just going to be in a smaller role.
They would be hero antagonists in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Which would be an interesting dynamic.
I think so.
This is why you and I should be working for one of these studios.
We need to be consultants.
The more I think about that, that is a really awesome...
I guarantee, and I thought, and look at what they're already kind of doing it on Gotham.
Right.
You know, the villains are hugely prominent.
Right.
Gotham. Hugely prominent. They are the stars in many ways.
Now, this whole concept of a shared universe is becoming more popular, and it kind of seems like our next topic, Ghostbusters, might go down that route. I don't know if he was being joking in that comment.
There's a bunch of this is where our rumors section come in, and we're going to have a bit of a rant here as well. Rumor that shared universe comment was most likely a PR tactic.
I agree.
The debate and the rumor is that for those of you who may not be aware, they announced that the Ghostbusters 3 would be coming out, and it would feature an all-female cast starring Kristen Wiig, starring Melissa McCarthy, starring Kate McKinnon and Leslie Jones, and these are all like SNL alums, with the exception of Melissa McCarthy.
Right, but also women who have starred in some very funny films and been very successful on TV.
Right, we have the big name from one of the breakout star from Bridesmaids, Melissa McCarthy, with Kristen Wiig as well from Bridesmaids. The director Paul Feig is from Bridesmaids, and then you have the true shining stars of SNL's current lineup, Kate McKinnon and Leslie Jones. I can't wait for that, but there are people who feel a little differently, and they of course are the Cheeto Brigade.
Yep.
And and what we mean by Cheeto Brigade is this: they are trolls, but they are a very specific type of troll. They are the trolls that live in their mother's basement and are literally covered in Cheeto dust. That's why they're called the Cheeto Brigade. But they are also the same type of troll that we saw emerge in Gamergate.
Right.
These are the disgustingly vile, racist, sexist, homophobic type that are they're the Call of Duty warriors. They think that they are the most macho people on the planet.
Right.
And they want you to know about it.
Yeah, and that any semblance of femininity spells some type of doom. And we saw that backlash. I believe when when Dan Aykroyd said they were trying to do a Ghostbusters 3, there was a rumor, there was some hesitation do we really want the guys to do it? They're old. Do we really want them to do it again?
Yeah.
But then there started rumors emerging, they might just do it with an all-female cast.
Yeah.
And that's when these people started losing their minds. Even if some people I know on Facebook that I went to high school with had some very disappointing comments regarding...
You ruined my childhood!
Right, and I liked what Paul Feig said today, that he said, quote, "The only way I can ruin your childhood is if I get into a time machine and went back and made you an orphan."
And that's the type of response
you need. And the thing is, this movie is standalone as far as we know, in the sense that it's not one day the guys all turn into women. This is not a retelling of the original movie. This is not a remake.
I believe they're the next generation.
Right, and presumably, their ghost-busting business was successful. They probably would have hired other people or trained other people to be Ghostbusters, because Venkman and all those guys just couldn't do it forever. Realistically, like if you want to think of this as a shared universe, in order for that universe to have some kind of realism, they'd have to throw up the proton packs or pass them along, and it's not like
they could very well be the kids.
Exactly, you don't know that, and it's not. It's also not like they're going back and they're adding tits to Bill Murray.
Although
that would be a very
CGI tits on Bill Murray.
That would be I would watch that remake.
I would too.
And it's not. They're not going back in the movie. They're not pulling some George Lucas stunt where they're going to digitally replace the actors from the original movie with Melissa McCarthy, Leslie Jones, and Kristen Wiig and McKinnon.
Look,
they're not doing that.
These guys are just like majorly assholes because
they don't want to share.
No, and I'll tell you what. All you need to do is see the reactions that people were having. My Twitter pal Leslie Jones, the star of the upcoming Ghostbusters. We had an interesting conversation on Twitter when she was attacked by someone, and this person said to her, "How fast can you peel a banana with your feet, Atlas Dog?" I'm telling you right now, that type of racist comment is only one of many. It's just one of many, and you should go on to @LesDog or just type in Leslie Jones to Twitter and take a look at some of the comments that she has received. It is absolutely deplorable. I get the feeling that this is going to be the next Gamergate.
I agree, especially once that trailer hits.
Yeah.
And they announced there's going to be another movie with Channing Tatum.
Yes.
So do you think that is a response by the studios like, look, we need to do a bro kind of movie?
I do.
Or do you think that they are really trying to do kind of like, let's see how much we can get out of this? Or is the Channing Tatum...
It's both.
Yeah.
I really feel it's both.
I agree.
I feel like they... Again, there are rumors circulating, and they're not illogical, that this was a last-minute decision. And
because it did kind of come out of nowhere.
It did. And I think that they were originally considering to do an all-male cast. Mm-hmm. And there were some names probably thrown around. Channing Tatum is one of them. Notice that there's only Channing Tatum's name coming.
Right.
Okay, so they had Channing Tatum, and they're like, all right, let's see. And then, of course, the all-female cast came in, mm-hmm. and that took off, and that got probably... Because you have... A lot of the great comedians in SNL right now are females. Mm-hmm. And that probably got a lot of traction. And, they fast-tracked that, and it went out, and... you had people excited, obviously, but then you had the backlash.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Dan Aykroyd started mentioning, you know what, we also have something else in the works. Mm-hmm. Sort of all, that they're calling a ghost corpse.
Yeah. And
I really feel like this is, yes, it became a shared universe thing because this is obviously the new trend in Hollywood right now,
which is another thing that could collapse.
These trends these trends, I don't know,
like it works from the comic books because those are on the page in the comic books, those are shared universes. You do have Iron Man bumping into Spider-Man. It just happens, and for the films not to acknowledge that all these
have always been a shared universe.
Exactly, and for those films not to acknowledge that all those characters exist in the same timeline would be silly. Same with Star Wars.
It was called the Expanded Universe. I mean,
right.
It already was pre-established.
Right.
It wasn't something concocted by Hollywood per se.
Right. But do we need a Ghostbusters shared universe?
I don't know. And it just seems to me like I feel like this was a last-ditch thing, and they knew what the PR was going to be. They knew that this was like, oh, here we go. These guys, they're not giving the all-female cast a chance, and they don't want to be called sexists. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be called, craven misogynists that are trying to, put
even though their
water
comments make them blatantly so.
No, not Dan Aykroyd or
no, I meant the people on.
Oh
no, not Dan and Channing. They're not sexist pigs by any means.
No,
I was referring to the some of the Twitter members.
Yeah, and I feel like it sort of was a reaction, and then they decided to make the best of it by calling it a shared universe.
Right.
And we'll never know. I mean, I guess I'll take their word for it that this was always in the works. Yeah. But I just can't help but feel that it was caused. I don't know how if I were Leslie Jones or Kate McKinnon or Melissa McCarthy or Kristen Wiig, I don't know how I would feel about somebody saying, "Oh wait, we're also going to have this one now."
Yeah, it does
around the same time that the backlash was going on.
Right.
I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around it.
No, you know what's going to be interesting is going to be the box office between those two movies.
And
can you imagine?
It's going to be another fucking narrative.
And can you imagine how those trolls are going to feel if the female one ends up making more money?
Does.
I do too, and I think it will.
I hope it fucking does.
I think that you're going to see the Leslie Jones, Kristen Wiig one. I think that one's going to be more successful.
I'll make a prediction right now. This movie is going to do for Leslie Jones what Bridesmaids did for Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah.
Leslie Jones is an amazing.
She's going to be the breakout.
Hysterical, fun, one of the best things on SNL right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, she is hysterical. Wait till you see her. All right, she's great. Yeah. I'm not saying that because we're like pals on Twitter or anything. But she's just hysterical.
The only way I see the Ghostbusters Men movie bringing in a bigger crowd is if they get every male star that can pander to both bros and chicks.
That's exactly what they're going to do.
So you're going to see a Ghostbusters movie with Channing Tatum, Chris Pratt. Who else do the ladies like?
Here's what it's going to probably be. If they were smart, it's going to be Channing Tatum. It's going to be Seth Rogen. It's going to be, let's see, what's that guy's name? The little guy?
Jonah Hill?
No, he's black.
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
Who else? Somebody who's kind of nerdy. Throw in a nerdy guy. I don't know.
Who's popular these days that's nerdy.
Yeah. So
there's some guy out there.
You're going to have the hunk. You're going to have Seth Rogen. You're going to have... Seth Rogen will be the wisecracker.
All right.
Then you're going to have...
Channing Tatum's your straight guy.
Kevin Hart...
is the sarcastic, funny guy.
And then you're going to have the nerdy guy.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Or Paul Rudd is going to be somebody who will take on the Bill Murray role.
Paul Rudd will voice a Slimer type character.
I want to know, is Slimer going to be in both of them?
And is Slimer going to be two different sexes in both of them?
will Slimer have boobs in the all-female cast? And will he have like a schlong in the all-male cast? Who knows?
That's quite disturbing.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yes.
The Slimer schlong.
Yes. Send in pictures of your own fan art.
Please do. We're very lonely.
Yes. And send us some love.
Send us love. And don't hate us because we're beautiful. Hate us because you hate our opinions.
Yes. That's very funny. Until then, this is Burn Popcorn.
I'm Dave Masakura.
And I'm Tony Thomas.
Have a good day.